My phone buzzed on the counter, a sharp, insistent sound that cut through the hum of my bakery. I was Emily Harper, 40 years old, standing in Harper's Sweet Haven, the heart of my world in Charleston, South Carolina. I wiped my hands, flour dusting my apron, expecting a sweet message from my husband. Dan. Today was our 15th wedding anniversary, a day I'd spent weeks planning, dreaming of a night filled with love and memories. But the words on the screen weren't sweet. They were a blade, slicing through 15 years in a single moment. I'm done, moving to Miami with Kaylee, took the joint account, happy anniversary. The piping bag slipped from my fingers, frosting splattering across the counter like a broken vow. My breath caught, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the chatter of customers. Kaylee, his 23-year-old coworker, the one with the too loud laugh at company picnics. Miami, a city of sun and escape, where Dan thought he could erase me. And the joint account, $50,000 built from my bakery's profits and his sales commissions, gone. With a cruel, happy anniversary to mock the love I'd believed in. I stood frozen, the world tilting, the roses I'd arranged for our celebration blurring into streaks of red. Emily, Mrs. Helen, a regular in her 60s, leaned over the counter, her eyes concerned. You okay, hon? You're pale as a ghost. I forced a smile, my lips trembling, my voice a stranger's. Just clumsy today, Helen. Your usual pie? I handed her the pie, my hands shaking, my mind a storm. Dan had shattered our life with a text, as if 15 years could be discarded like an old receipt. I wanted to scream, to collapse, but the bakery was full, eyes watching, customers expecting the cheerful Emily who baked their birthdays and weddings. I couldn't break. Not here. Not now. Harper's Sweet Haven was my sanctuary, a dream I'd built from scratch in the heart of Charleston's cobblestone streets. The city woke up soft and golden, its waterfront sparkling, its history whispering through live oaks and pastel houses. My bakery was a cornerstone, its windows glowing with the promise of cupcakes and coffee, its counters lined with roses for today's milestone. A banner hung above, proclaiming Emily and Dan, 15 years in golden script. I'd spent hours crafting a heart-shaped cake, piping forever in elegant swirls, believing tonight would be a celebration of us, Dan and Emily, partners through every storm. Mrs. Helen's words echoed as she left. Dan's the luckiest man in Charleston. I'd smiled then, brushing off the unease that had lingered for months. Dan had been distant, late nights at the office, vague excuses about client dinners, a new obsession with designer shirts that didn't suit his 45-year-old frame. I'd pushed the doubts aside, telling myself it was stress, that he was still my Dan, the man who'd laughed with me over burnt cupcakes in our tiny apartment, who'd held my hand when I opened this bakery. But now, his text laid bare the truth. He wasn't mine anymore. In the back office, I locked the door, the hum of the bakery fading. I checked the bank app, my fingers trembling. Balance, $8. $8 where there should have been $50,000. My knees buckled, and for a moment, I let the pain crash over me, the betrayal, the theft, the mockery of happy anniversary. I wanted to curl up, to let the tears come, but a memory sparked, sharp and clear, pulling me back from the edge. 6 months ago, I'd started to suspect Dan. It began one night when he left his phone on the counter, the screen lighting up with a text. "Thanks for the flowers, babe!" From Kaylee. My heart had pounded as I scrolled, my hands shaking, finding flirty messages, late-night calls, a winking emoji that made my stomach churn. I'd sat on our couch, the silence of our house deafening, feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. The next day, I checked our joint account, my suspicions growing. A $200 charge for a business dinner on a night Dan swore he was working late. A $150 hotel charge, unexplained. A $500 watch I'd never seen, gleaming on his wrist weeks later. Each discovery was a pinprick, building a picture I didn't want to see. I'd confronted him once, my voice casual to hide my fear. "Dan, what's this hotel charge? Was it a work trip?" He'd laughed, his eyes sliding away. "Just business. You worry too much. Don't you trust me?" His words had stung, but I wasn't naive. I'd opened a secret bank account at a different bank, transferring 70% of my personal savings, $45,000, from the joint account. I'd left just enough to keep Dan unsuspecting. My movements quiet, deliberate, like a chess player planning 10 moves ahead. I'd confided in Lydia Grant, my lawyer, a woman with a steel spine and a knack for seeing through lies. "If he's cheating," I'd told her, my voice shaking, "I'm not losing everything I've built. This bakery, this life. It's mine." Now, staring at the $8 balance, I opened my secret account, $45,000, safe and untouched. A lifeline I'd woven in the dark, when doubt first whispered in my ear. It wasn't enough to erase the pain, but it was enough to fight. Dan thought he'd broken me, left me begging in the ruins of our marriage. He was wrong. "You thought I'd crumble. Dan," I whispered, my voice low, edged with fire. I dialed Lydia, my fingers trembling, but my resolve ironclad. "Lydia, it's Emily. He made his move. Let's make ours." My voice cracked, and for a moment, the tears came, hot and silent, spilling down my cheeks. I let them fall, mourning the man I'd loved, the life I'd believed in. But I wouldn't stay broken. I thought of the bakery, its warm light, its roses, its promise of tomorrow. I thought of Charleston, its cobblestone streets, its community that had cheered my grand opening, that had made Harper's sweet haven a home. Dan had lit the match, thinking he'd burn me down. But I'd built a fortress, $45,000, a lawyer, a dream he couldn't touch. I wiped my eyes, straightened my apron, and unlocked the office door. The bakery was still open, customers waiting, their laughter a world away from the storm in my heart. I stepped back into the light, my smile steadier now, my hands no longer shaking. Tonight was supposed to be about love, a celebration of 15 years with the man I thought I knew. Instead, it was the start of a war I'd been preparing for without even knowing it. Dan had betrayed me, stolen from me, mocked me. But he didn't know what was coming. He didn't know the woman he'd underestimated, the one who'd rise from his ashes, stronger, fiercer, ready to fight for everything she'd built. I looked at the heart-shaped cake. Its forever, now a lie. I picked up a knife, not to cut it, but to set it aside, a reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd gained. "This isn't over, Dan," I said, my voice steady, a promise to myself. Not by a long shot. The morning after Dan's text, Harper's sweet haven felt like a stranger's house. The roses I'd arranged for our anniversary still bloomed, their scent now cloying, a reminder of the love I'd believed in, the golden banner, Emily and Dan, that of 15 years, hung limp, mocking me with its promise of forever. I was 40, a woman who'd poured her heart into this bakery, into a marriage, only to have it shattered by a man I thought I knew. But I wasn't the fragile wife Dan imagined. I'd built this place from a dream, turning flour and sugar into a Charleston institution. He wouldn't take that from me. In the office, I sat at my cluttered desk, the hum of the bakery fading behind the locked door. My laptop glowed. Bank statements and receipts spread before me like a battlefield. Dan's text played on a loop in my mind. "Happy anniversary," with its cruel, smug tone. I opened my phone, rereading his follow-up message. "You're too old for dreams, Emily. Kaylee makes me young." The words burned, but I screenshot them, my hands steady now. "Keep talking, Dan," I muttered. Every word was a weapon he didn't know he'd handed me. I pulled up our joint account history, my suspicions from months ago now glaringly clear. 6 months back, I'd found the first crack, a $200 charge for a business dinner on a night Dan claimed he was at the office. Then a $150 hotel charge, a $500 watch I'd never seen, a $300 florist bill for Kaylee. Each discovery had been a blow, but I'd kept them locked in my heart, building a case I prayed I'd never need. I'd transferred $45,000 to a secret account, my lifeline, after consulting Lydia. "Protect yourself," she'd said, her voice firm. "Men like Dan don't change." Now, I called the bank, my voice calm but urgent. My husband used our joint card for first-class flights and a Miami hotel. Cancel them and remove him as an authorized user. The bank rep's tone sharpened. "Got proof of fraud, ma'am." Text messages admitting he took $50,000 and booked travel with his girlfriend. I said, forwarding Dan's messages. "You'll see his happy anniversary confession." "Done," she replied, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "Charges canceled." "He's off the card." I leaned back, imagining Dan and Kaylee at the airport, their grand escape unraveling. Sure enough, my phone rang an hour later. Dan's voice was a storm of rage. "What the hell? Emily? You froze our cards? The airline won't let us board. You're screwing us over." I took a breath, my voice cold as steel. "Check your email. Dan, that's your debt notice. See you in court." He cursed and hung up, but the victory was fleeting. That afternoon, an email from Dan's lawyer landed like a grenade. Dan claimed he'd invested $10,000 in Harper's Sweet Haven 5 years ago, using joint funds to buy ovens and mixers. He demanded half the business in the divorce, calling it a marital asset. My stomach dropped. The $10,000 was real. I'd needed it when the bakery was struggling, a desperate loan from our joint account. But I'd repaid it within a year. Every penny documented because I'd sworn never to let Dan hold my dream hostage. I called Lydia, my voice shaking. "Dan's coming for the bakery. He's got a receipt for $10,000? "Find the repayment proof," Lydia said, her tone steady. "We'll bury him with his own lies." I tore through old files, my heart pounding. Dust coated my fingers as I flipped through folders, panic rising. What if I'd lost it? What if Dan's lawyer twisted the truth? Finally, I found it. A bank transfer receipt. $10,000 back to the joint account. Dated 4 years ago. I scanned it, sent it to Lydia, and sank into my chair, relief washing over me. But the fight was far from over. The bakery door chimed, and I looked up to see Susan, Dan's mother, storming in. Her face was red, her eyes blazing. Customers froze, sensing drama. "You're destroying my son!" Susan snapped, her voice loud enough to turn heads. "Freezing his cards, humiliating him in front of Kaylee? How dare you, Emily?" I took a deep breath, my hands clenched. "Susan, let's talk outside or read this first." I showed her Dan's text, the one mocking my age, bragging about the $50,000 he'd stolen. Her eyes widened, then filled with shame. "He didn't tell me," she whispered, her voice breaking. She turned and left, the door slamming behind her. But the damage was done. Customers whispered, their glances sharp. Was I the villain Dan painted me as? The woman who'd driven her husband away? That night, I sat alone in the bakery, the anniversary cake untouched. It's forever now a cruel joke. Dan's email haunted me. If he could convince a judge the bakery was joint property, I could lose everything. My dream, my livelihood, my home. I thought of the early days when I'd worked 16-hour shifts, Dan complaining about my obsession with the bakery. "It's a hobby, he'd said, rolling his eyes. Yet now he claimed it as his own. I opened a drawer, pulling out a photo from our 5th anniversary. Dan's arm was around me, his smile wide, his eyes warm. Where had that man gone? The one who'd believed in me, who'd laughed when I got frosting in my hair? Tears stung my eyes, but I wiped them away. that Dan was gone, replaced by a stranger chasing youth with a 23-year-old. I'd prepared for this, hadn't I? The secret account, the receipts, the lawyer, all pieces of a puzzle I'd started assembling when I first saw Kaylee's name. I looked at the wilting roses, their petals falling like my old dreams. "This isn't over, Dan," I whispered, my voice trembling but fierce. Not by a long shot. The Charleston courthouse stood like a sentinel, its marble halls cold and unforgiving. I sat beside Lydia, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles whitened, my heart a drumbeat in my chest. Across the room, Dan slouched in his chair, his flashy blazer screaming midlife crisis. At 45, he looked like a man trying to outrun time, his smirk forced, his eyes darting. Kaylee wasn't there, probably unpacking in some Miami motel, their dream getaway derailed by a canceled credit card. This was our first battle, an emergency hearing to freeze assets and protect my bakery. But as I faced Dan, I felt the weight of 15 years, the love I'd poured into a man who'd thrown it away. Lydia presented our evidence with surgical precision. Dan's texts admitting he'd drained $50,000, receipts for his secret spending, flowers, watches, a Miami flight booked with our joint card. I watched the judge, a stern woman with gray hair, her face unreadable as she flipped through the documents. My stomach churned. Would it be enough? Could Dan's charm, his salesman's smile, sway her? Dan's lawyer, a slick man with a voice like oil, stood. Mr. Carter invested $10,000 in Harper's Sweet Haven, a joint marital asset. He's entitled to half the business. He slid a receipt across the table, $10,000 for bakery equipment, paid from our joint account 5 years ago. My heart raced. It was true. A desperate loan when the bakery was bleeding money, but I'd repaid it, every cent, because I'd refused to let Dan hold my dream over me. Lydia pushed forward my receipt, her voice steady. "Mrs. Harper returned the $10,000 within a year," she said. "The bakery is her sole property, as shown in the business contract, signed before the marriage." I exhaled. But Dan's lawyer wasn't done. He called a witness, Tom, a former bakery employee who'd quit last year. My stomach twisted as Tom took the stand, his eyes avoiding mine. "Emily called Dan her business partner," Tom said, his voice flat. "Said he was key to the bakery's success, gave him credit for its growth." The room spun. I'd never said that. Dan had mocked my dream, called it a hobby, rolled his eyes when I stayed late to balance the books. But Tom's words painted a lie that could cost me everything. I leaned toward Lydia, whispering, "He's lying. I never said that." Lydia's eyes narrowed, her voice low. "Stay calm. I've got this." She cross-examined Tom, her tone like a blade. "Did Mr. Carter offer you anything for this testimony?" Tom hesitated, his fingers twitching. Lydia produced a text from Dan to Tom. $500 to say Emily called me a partner. Easy money." The courtroom murmured, customers from the bakery in the gallery whispering. The judge's frown deepened, her pen tapping the desk. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice sharp. "You admitted to draining a joint account via text message. Now you're bribing witnesses?" Dan squirmed, his smirk gone. "I just wanted a clean break. Your Honor." "By committing fraud?" the judge snapped. "All shared assets are frozen. Return the $50,000 within 48 hours. And Mr. Carter, the court takes a dim view of perjury." Dan's face crumpled, his eyes burning into me. "You'll regret this, Emily," he shouted as his lawyer pulled him back. The gavel fell, and Lydia squeezed my hand. "We've got him," she whispered. I should have felt triumphant. But as we left the courtroom, a memory hit me like a wave. Years ago, Dan had helped pick the bakery's location, walking the streets of Charleston with me, his eyes bright with pride. "This spot's perfect, Em," he'd said, his arm around me. We were partners then, weren't we? The thought stung, and my eyes burned. I'd prepared for the money, the lawyer, the fight, but I hadn't prepared for the ache of losing who we used to be, the man who'd loved me before he chased youth and betrayal. Outside, the Charleston air was heavy with summer heat. Lydia noticed my silence. "You okay, Emily?" I nodded, but I wasn't. Dan's betrayal wasn't just financial. It was a theft of trust, of memories, of the life I'd built in my heart. I thought of our 5th anniversary, Dan's laughter as we danced in our tiny apartment, frosting in my hair. Where had that man gone? Replaced by a stranger who'd mocked my age, stolen our savings, and tried to claim my dream as his own. Back at the bakery, I locked the door and sat in the dark. The anniversary banner still hung, a cruel reminder of the love I'd lost. I tore it down, the fabric ripping in my hands, and let it fall to the floor. Tears came then, hot and unstoppable, but they weren't just for Dan. They were for me, the woman who'd trusted, who'd loved, who'd believed in forever. No regrets. "Dan," I whispered, my voice breaking. "Not anymore." I stood, wiping my eyes. The bakery was quiet, but it was mine. Every cupcake, every table, every dream I'd baked into these walls. Dan could take our savings, our marriage, but he couldn't take this. I'd fight for it, for me, for the woman I was becoming. The war wasn't over, but I'd won the first battle, and I was ready for the next. A week after the hearing, Dan was back in Charleston, his Miami escape a humiliating failure. He and Kaylee were holed up in a cramped apartment, their plans derailed by debt and canceled cards. I'd hoped the court's ruling would end his fight, but Dan was desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. He spread rumors through Charleston's tight-knit community, telling friends I'd cheated him out of the bakery, painting me as a greedy, vindictive wife who'd ruined his life. The whispers reached Harper's sweet haven, and by the time the annual Charleston Charity Fair arrived, my booth was struggling. The fair was a Charleston tradition, its stalls lining the waterfront, the air alive with music and the scent of fried oysters. My booth, usually a magnet for cupcake lovers, was eerily quiet. Customers avoided my table, their eyes darting away, their whispers sharp. "Heard she tricked Dan out of his share," one woman muttered. "Poor guy, stuck with nothing," said another. I stood behind my display, my smile frozen, my heart sinking. Had Dan's lies turned my community against me? A man named Greg, a friend of Dan's from his sales team, approached, his voice loud and mocking. "You destroyed Dan, you greedy liar! That bakery was his idea, and you stole it!" My cheeks burned, the crowd's eyes on me. I wanted to hide, to run back to the safety of my bakery, but then Rachel, Dan's sister, pushed through the throng. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with regret. "Emily, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Dan lied to us. He said you were controlling, that you pushed him away, but I saw his texts, the ones mocking you, bragging about the money he took. He's not the brother I thought I knew." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge. I climbed onto a table, my knees trembling, my voice shaking but growing stronger with every word. "Harper's Sweet Haven is my dream, built from years of early mornings and late nights. Dan tried to take everything, our savings, our home, my future. But I fought back, not for revenge, but for me, for this community that's kept me going through every storm." The crowd hushed, their faces softening. Mrs. Helen, tears in her eyes, stepped forward. "We're with you! Emily!" she called, buying a dozen cupcakes. Others followed, their wallets open, their smiles warm. My booth sold out in hours, the fair alive with support. That night, I hosted a free tasting event at the bakery, the place packed with laughter and chatter. Customers shared stories of their own struggles, their own fights. And I realized I wasn't alone. Charleston hadn't turned its back on me. It had lifted me up. But Dan wasn't finished. His lawyer filed a new motion, accusing me of hiding profits from the bakery to cheat him in the divorce. The claim was absurd, based on fabricated numbers. But it sent a chill through me. What if the judge believed him? What if Dan's lies chipped away at everything I'd built? Lydia laughed when she read the motion. "It's nonsense," she said. "His numbers don't add up. The judge will toss this out faster than a burnt pie." She was right. The motion was dismissed. The judge scolding Dan's lawyer for wasting the court's time. But the rumors lingered, a shadow over my victory. Some customers still hesitated, their trust shaken by Dan's poison. I poured my energy into the bakery, launching an online delivery service that took off overnight. Orders flooding in from across South Carolina. I started a baking class for local women, teaching them to make pies, cakes, and dreams. It was my way of giving back, of rebuilding what Dan had tried to break. One day, Kaylee showed up at a class, her eyes nervous, her hands twisting her purse strap. I froze. The memory of Dan's text, Kaylee's name, his betrayal, flashing through me. But she looked different, smaller, her confidence gone. "I'm sorry, Emily," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dan lied about you, said you were cold, controlling, that you didn't love him. I believed him, thought I was special. But in that apartment, with no money, no plan, he blamed everyone but himself. Me, you, the world. I left him. Nah, I studied her, seeing a young woman who'd learned a hard lesson. I remembered being 23, trusting too easily, dreaming too big. We both fell for his lies once," I said, my voice soft. "Keep building. Kaylee, you're stronger than you know." She nodded, joining the class, her hands hesitant but eager as she kneaded dough. As I watched her, I realized I wasn't just rebuilding my life. I was helping others rebuild theirs. The bakery wasn't just a business. It was a beacon, a place where broken dreams could rise again. Dan's rumors had hurt, but they hadn't won. Charleston had chosen me, and I'd chosen myself. A year after Dan's text, Harper's Sweet Haven was no longer just a bakery. It was a Charleston legend. 3 new locations dotted South Carolina, each one busier than the last, their windows glowing with the promise of fresh pies and warm coffee. My online delivery service shipped cupcakes across the country, from Charleston's waterfront to Seattle's rainy streets. My baking classes were booked months in advance. Women of all ages gathering to learn, to laugh, to heal. I was 41 now, no longer the woman who'd trembled at Dan's betrayal. I was stronger, wiser, prouder, a woman who'd turned pain into power. I stood on a stage in Atlanta, addressing a conference of female entrepreneurs. The auditorium was packed, their faces a sea of hope and ambition. "Protect your dreams," I told them, my voice steady, resonant. "Trust your gut. It's not paranoia, it's power. When someone tries to break you, build something they can't touch." The crowd rose, their applause a tidal wave, echoing in my chest. I thought of the anniversary cake, the roses, the text that was meant to end me. Dan had wanted me to beg, to crumble, to prove his power. Instead, I'd built an empire, not just of cupcakes and coffee, but of resilience, of community, of love for myself. Backstage, I checked my email, my hands steady on my phone. One message caught my eye, from Dan. "I'm broke. Emily, I've changed. Help me with $20,000, please. I'm sorry for everything." I stared at the words, a flood of memories crashing through me. His happy anniversary text, his smirk in court, the rumors that nearly broke my spirit. I remembered the nights I'd cried, the days I'd doubted, the moment I'd torn down that anniversary banner. Dan's apology was too late, too hollow. I deleted the email, my finger firm on the screen, and opened my banking app. I donated $5,000 to a charity for women escaping financial abuse, adding a note, "From a survivor." Dan was living in a garage apartment now, his sales job gone after his company downsized. Mutual friends whispered about his dating profile, calling himself young at heart. His photo outdated, his charm faded. No one swiped right. Kaylee had moved on, earning a business degree and starting a small marketing firm. She was a regular at my classes, her laughter bright as she learned to bake, her hands steady with purpose. I saw myself in her, the woman I might have been if I'd stayed naive, if I hadn't fought. One night, I stood in Harper's Sweet Haven, the original location, now the flagship of my empire. The counters gleamed, the air sweet with the promise of tomorrow's orders. I hung a new sign above the counter. Happiness is homemade, like a good cake. It wasn't just about baking, it was about building a life from scratch, piece by piece, even when someone tried to tear it down. I thought of Susan, Dan's mother, who'd called last week, her voice heavy with regret. "I saw Dan," she'd said, smoothing her dress, one she'd bought from a boutique that now carried my branded aprons. "He talks about his glory days, the life he could have had, but he threw it away. Emily, you taught us that. You showed us what strength looks like, what it means to stand up." Her words stayed with me as I locked the bakery, the Charleston night soft and warm around me. I walked home, the stars bright above the waterfront, my phone buzzing with orders for tomorrow's deliveries. Dan's text was meant to end me, to leave me begging in the ruins of our marriage. Instead, it sparked a fire. Every new location, every class, every smile from a customer was proof I'd won, not by destroying him, but by building something better. I thought of the women in my classes, their hands dusted with flour, their stories of heartbreak and hope. Kaylee, learning to trust herself, Mrs. Helen, cheering me on at the fair, Rachel, choosing truth over family loyalty. They were my community, my strength, my legacy. Dan had wanted to dim my light, to trade me for a younger model, to claim my dream as his own. Instead, he'd pushed me to shine brighter, to become a woman who didn't just survive, but thrived. As I reached my house, the one I'd inherited from my mother, the one Dan could never touch, I paused. I looked at my reflection in the window, my face older but fiercer, my eyes alive with purpose. I wasn't the woman Dan had mocked, the one he'd called too old for dreams. I was Emily Harper, baker, dreamer, survivor, and I was just getting started. The phone buzzed again. Another order, another step forward. I smiled, knowing life was moving in the direction I'd chosen, not the one Dan had planned. Success wasn't revenge. It was living better than those who hurt you. And I was living my best life yet. One cupcake, one dream, one unbreakable heart at a time.